See you, and it's always, I love hearing those stories, those testimonies of those getting baptized. So well done for sharing them so confidently and so clearly and so well. And they're just testifying to what God has done in their lives. That's what's happened to them. Their journeys have all been different. That is what God has done in their lives. It's very difficult to argue with someone's story, with their lived testimony, their lived experience of what God has done in their lives. And today they are, as you've heard, they're making a definite choice. As I said, they've all come through different journeys, different lengths of time. But today, what they have in common is they are all making a very definite choice to say in front of everybody, I belong to Jesus. I choose to align myself with him, to follow him, to trust him, to submit my life to him, to give him control of my life. And of course, we've also seen a set of parents also expressing their desire today through the dedication. That their children would make that same kind of choice at some point, at the right times in their lives in the future. And most of us in here today, people who are part of the church, most of us in here today have also made that choice at some point in our lives. And of course, it's a daily choice. To follow Jesus is a daily choice. We continue to choose to follow Jesus very, very imperfectly, but we do continue to choose to follow him on a daily basis. And when we do that, when we make that choice, we're aligning ourselves with a particular way of seeing the world and understanding the world and understanding ourselves and why the world is as it is and why things are as they are, why our lives are like they are. We're aligning ourselves with a particular way of seeing the world. That's those of us who have made that choice to follow Jesus. But of course, I'm also aware that that's not everyone in here. That won't be everybody. Some of you may be exploring faith, and you're exploring, but you're not quite there yet. You're not quite. You can't stand and say with the confidence that we've just heard, Jesus is my Lord and my Savior. Some of you here today, you may have had a faith in the past. You may have been a time in your life where there was a faith there, but whatever's happened, circumstances of life have meant that actually now that's not an active faith. And of course, for some of you here today, it might be something that you've never really even remotely considered. But you're here for whatever reason, whether you've been invited or you've just come for whatever reason, you are here today. And I don't believe that's an accident. So if I may, for those who are not in that position of having made that choice, I'd just love to use the next few minutes to talk particularly to you, just to try and bring some explanation of what is going on here. What is this really all about? I mentioned that when we make that choice to follow Jesus, we align ourselves with a particular way of seeing the world. Now, this is probably a huge oversimplification, but there are really, broadly speaking, two major and opposing narratives, opposing storylines that are present in our world that seek to explain the world, to seek to explain why things are as they are, like a lens through which we view the world and understand the world, and it shapes how we see it and how we see ourselves. So you've got the biblical storyline, which of course is the storyline that most of us in here would align ourselves with. The biblical storyline, which is where God creates the world in the beginning. And that's a key thing, isn't it? It's that we were created, we were designed with great care rather than being a random collision of atoms. So God creates the world in the biblical storyline, but humans rebelled. There's this good creation, but humans rebelled, brought sin, brought corruption into the world. We turned our backs on God, and we deserve judgment for that. And you have the problem of evil. There is evil in the world. I think we'd all acknowledge that. But the solution to that comes from God himself through Jesus. And that results eventually in the future in a new creation where justice and peace are fully restored. And so that's the kind of arc of the biblical storyline. You have creation, it's good. Corruption and sin come in, that's bad, that's decreation. And then recreation. The answer comes through Jesus, who will make all things new in the end. That's the biblical storyline. Then you have the secular storyline. The secular storyline seeks to take God out of the equation, remove God from this picture by taking away any idea of creation or design, which straight away for me is a pretty hopeless vision for the world. If we're not designed, if we're not created, if we're not made with loving care. The secular view, the secular storyline doesn't acknowledge, well, it can't acknowledge any inherent moral problem of evil because it has no basis for acknowledging that. Because what is morality anyway without God? There are just some bad people and some good people. That's how it is. And the secular storyline looks not to God, but to the ongoing self-improvement of humanity, for humanity to solve its own problems. So basically, one storyline where all our hopes are placed in God to rescue us, and another where our hopes are placed in humanity rescuing itself. The common thread being that we are in need of rescue. We are in need of rescue. We have big problems in the world. There is something fundamentally wrong and broken with the world. I don't think I need to expand on that. You just have to look at the news and look at your neighborhoods and look at, you just can see it everywhere. The question really is this: which storyline do you ultimately follow? Where ultimately is your hope? Is it in God or is it in man? Here's a quote from someone who very much believed in human progress, the ability of human beings to find solutions and to solve the problems. This is H.G. Wells, the writer, speaking in 1937. He said this: "Can we doubt that presently our race will more than realize our boldest imaginations, that it will achieve unity and peace, and that our children will live in a world made more splendid and lovely than any palace or garden that we know, going on from strength to strength in an ever-widening circle of achievement? What man has done forms but the prelude to the things that man has yet to do." Now, that's a very optimistic view of the world, of mankind, of the progress of man. And undoubtedly, you can look at a number of achievements, a number of things that humanity has done and think, that's really good. That is progress. That's really clever. But this is H.G. Wells a few years later, after the war. He said, "The cold-blooded massacres of the defenseless, the return of deliberate and organized torture, mental torment and fear to a world from which such things had seemed well nigh banished, has come near to breaking my spirit altogether. Homo sapiens, as he's been pleased to call himself, is played out." That's a very different view of the world. History shows us time and time again, the present world shows us time and time again, that man's track record is not good. Man's track record of solving problems tends to lead to other problems. Man's track record is not good. Why is that? It's because the problem actually lies within us. It's not outside of us, the problem lies within us. It was Alexander Solzhenitsyn who talks about this dividing line of good and evil that runs through every human heart. The problem is within each one of us. The biblical story, the biblical narrative tells us to recognize that, accept that, recognize it, and turn to the only place we can turn for help, which is our Creator. It offers a different kind of hope from the secular storyline. So 1 Peter 1:3, this is from a letter in the New Testament by the Apostle Peter. And he said, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope." A living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Now, I think we're all aware, regardless of faith, whether you'd say I'm a person of faith or no faith or something in between, I think we're all aware that we need hope in our lives. Everybody needs hope. Every human being is aware. Deep down, there are longings within us. There's a longing for meaning. We're grasping for things, trying to find meaning, trying to find purpose, trying to find fulfillment, trying to find acceptance, trying to find satisfaction. There's longings for meaning, purpose, and ultimately for hope. And of course, we become particularly aware of that need in our lives when things go wrong. And we all know that things go wrong and will go wrong. We all know that some sort of suffering and sorrow, it is just an inescapable part of life. Things go wrong, loved ones pass away, life changes in an instant for various reasons. And it's in those times that we really need, or rather we become aware of the deep need we already have, but maybe weren't aware of it before, of a solid and living hope that goes beyond our circumstances, rather than it being a hope that is rooted in our circumstances. I've used this example many times before. Somebody called Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychotherapist who survived the Holocaust. And he observed and he identified 4 main responses to the unimaginable suffering that people went through in the concentration camps. So one response he noticed was that people became brutal. Some people just became brutal. They were cruel. Even some of the nicest people became cruel and brutal. They would trample on anyone to survive. It was survive at any cost. He said there were others who just gave up. They refused to get dressed, they refused to wash, they refused to go out on parade and roll call, even though there were punishments being handed out. They just gave up, even some of the most optimistic people. He said there were some who held on for a future hope. In other words, if I can get through this, then when I get out the other side of this terrible time, I can just get all those things that I had in my life back, the things that I was putting my hope in before, the things that brought me my identity and comfort in life, whether that is health, family, wealth, position in society, professional achievements, all the things that they had before, that they would be restored. That was their hope, but of course the reality turned out very differently, because some of those things simply couldn't be restored, but also there was no earthly thing or earthly happiness that could possibly compensate for the suffering, the horrific suffering they'd gone through. And so that sense of meaning that they were hoping would come back didn't come back. And that led to disillusionment and led many to depression and even to suicide. But there was a fourth response that he observed. And he said there were a few people who were able to keep an inner strength that somehow raised them above their outward fate, their outward circumstances. And that was where they had a hope that suffering and death could not destroy, could not touch. A hope that was greater than the things of this world. Whether that was God, a belief in God, and my hope is in God, or whether it was something else like the idea of a friend, a family member, a loved one, a spouse, looking down on you from heaven and not wanting to disappoint them, living for them. See, the thing is, suffering, when we go through suffering, it exposes the weaknesses in the things in which we place our hope. The things that we are living for, the things that we look to for the meaning in our lives, for significance in life. What is it that you're living for? If you're really honest with yourself, what are you living for? What is core to your identity? What foundation are you looking to stand on? You know, for some it might be just to get that much more money. I need this much money, or I really want that relationship, or a family. I want children. I want this career promoted. What is it you're living for? Got lots of young people in here today. Young people, what is it you're living for? If you think about it, you know, if you're young like me. I mean, that's unkind. No, seriously, young people, what are you living for? Because you have, if you're, I'm not going to define young, but let's say if you're a teenager, you have so many things vying for your attention, all promising to bring happiness, all promising to bring fulfillment. This is what you need: popularity with your friends. You need to be in that group of friends. And so you'll do anything to be in that group of friends. You need the grades. You need the best grades to make you stand out from your peers. You need this, you need that. I don't know what it is, but if you think about it, what is it that drives you to act in the way you act, and to kind of like think towards your future? What is it that's driving you? What are you looking to? What is there something about, for all of us, is there something about which you say, if I could just have that, then I would be happy? Because whatever that is what you're living for. That is what you worship. It's your ultimate hope. It's the thing that you're resting the weight of your life on. It will probably change as life goes on, but that's what you're resting the weight of your life on. The problem is this: whenever we make any finite and changeable thing, something that can change and shift, whenever we make something like that into our ultimate hope, whether it is health, wealth, career, family, position, achievements, none of which are bad things in themselves, but when we make finite and changeable things into our ultimate hope, then suffering is when those things get stripped away. If your ultimate hope right now is that I can be in that in-crowd of friends, suffering for you is when you get rejected by them. It's a really shaky foundation to stand on. And it leads to disillusionment, it leads to depression, and actually, in some cases, depending on what it is, it leads to our lives getting destroyed, devastated, because something has happened that we were placing our hope in. See, if I make my wife my ultimate hope, or she makes me her ultimate hope, we're in big trouble. One, because we don't always love each other as we promised we would. We sometimes let each other down, me more than her. I've just played the safety card there yet. But secondly, because we won't be alive forever. The fact is, we're all dying, and we don't know when that's going to happen. Just to cheer you all up this morning. The thing is, we can't put our ultimate hope in one another. We can't put the weight of our lives on one another, because what happens when it's gone? It's a really shaky foundation. When we take any good thing and we make it into an ultimate thing, we're on a very shaky foundation indeed, because we're relying on something which could change in an instant. We need an infinite reference point. We need a living and eternal and unchanging hope to be able to handle suffering and sorrow when they inevitably come, to be able to handle life, because the reality is, of course, if you live long enough, you will ultimately lose all those other good things. You will lose your health. You will ultimately lose any wealth you have, because you can't take it with you. You will lose family and friends. You will lose your career. They're all good things. They're all really good things to be enjoyed in lives. They're part of the richness of our lives, all of those things, but they're terrible foundations. We need a living hope. We need one that doesn't die, one that doesn't change. So what is it? What's this living hope? Well, Peter goes on in the next verse. He talks about an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you. This inheritance is kept in heaven. That means it's guaranteed. It's completely secure. It can't change. It can't be removed. It is kept. But what is it? What is it? Well, what we believe, what the Bible teaches us, is that on the cross, Jesus, when he went to the cross, he was given everything that the human race deserves. And we know that the human record deserves condemnation and rejection from God. It's just what we deserve, but Jesus took that on himself. He paid the penalty for our sin. He paid the debt that we could never have paid back in a million years. But not only that, not only does he take something negative away from us, but he also gives us so much. If you believe in him, if you put your trust fully in him, not only does he absorb your debt that you owe, but you also get from God what Jesus himself deserved, the record that he deserved. You get it credited to you. The righteousness of Christ. I mean, this is like something being credited to your bank account. You get the righteousness of Christ credited to you because you're putting your trust in him. The perfect life he lived is credited to you, almost as if you had lived it yourself. I mean, it's amazing. It almost sounds too good to be true. As a result, you are reconciled with God. Because now, with Jesus' record, you can be in the presence of a holy God. You're reconciled with God. You have that missing piece of the puzzle in your life. We all know that there's this, again, I talked about longings before, that there's this, it's like there's something missing. There's a puzzle piece that's missing. Like when you get to the end of the puzzle and there's that one bit in the middle which is not there. And we're searching, grasping for what is it? Where do I find fulfillment? Where do I look for satisfaction? Where do I find happiness in life? Well, the missing piece of the puzzle is peace with God. That's what we're all missing, because we were created to have peace with God, and that is what was lost when sin came into the world. Peace with God. This is a really good deal. It's a really good exchange, and that's the gospel. That's why it's called the gospel. The gospel means good news. It is good news. It's great news. It's amazing news. It's incredible news. It's a great deal for us. You were born into this living hope, not through your good deeds or achievements or your performance, but through the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, many people, of course, will try to live a good life in the hope that if there is a heaven, if there is a God, then I will get there. My good deeds will make me acceptable to God. Don't get me wrong, it's good to try to live a good life. I'm not discouraging that. It's good to try to live a good life, but the reality is this: your life, as good as it might be, will never be good enough to earn acceptance with a holy God. His standard is way beyond us. He's holy, he's pure. We're nowhere near it. Even if you can think of the best person you know, the one who does all the charity work and has compassion and is selfless, is generous, is always doing stuff for other people and just a great person, the best people we know will never reach the standard of God. That is the reality. The difference for me as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, is that I stand in absolute assurance. I know that I am acceptable to God right now. I know it. I know it, not because I'm good, but because Jesus is. It's all on the basis of what he has done. It's on the basis of inheriting his perfect record that he willingly gives. So I have a desire in the light of that to live a changed life. I want to live for God. Why wouldn't I? It's the difference between religion and the gospel. Religion is all about saving yourself. Follow the rules, be a good person so I can get to heaven. It's I give God my righteous record and then God owes me. That's religion. That's not the gospel. That's not what Jesus lived for. It's not what he tells us about. It's not what we're taught in the Bible. The gospel is about knowing your record will never be righteous enough. It's about receiving and resting in God's work of salvation and knowing God gives me his righteous record in Jesus Christ so that I can live in freedom for him and enjoy everything he deserves for eternity as an adopted son of God. That's who I am. That's my identity. That's the inheritance that will never perish, spoil, or fade, and that is the living and eternal hope that we have. So finally, very briefly, how do you get this living hope if you don't already have it? You get it by believing the gospel. Jesus is the Son of God, came as a man. We celebrate it every Christmas. He did die on the cross for your sins, and he rose to new life. Good. Believe the gospel, believe in that salvation, but also you declare that Jesus is Lord. He's not only your Savior, he is your Lord, that you're going to follow him even when it's hard. You're going to do what he says. You're going to follow his ways. Why? Because he's good. He's good and he's trustworthy and he knows best what is best for our lives. Why wouldn't you trust somebody who goes to die that kind of death on your behalf? That's what it's happened to the people getting baptized today. They've believed the gospel, they've received Christ for themselves, they've committed to follow him as Lord, and they've been born again into a living and eternal and glorious inheritance. Now, does this mean they're going to live lives of sinless perfection without challenge, without struggle from now on? Of course it doesn't. They will face many challenges, many temptations. They will mess it up at times, as we all do, because there's still brokenness in us and we live in a broken world. But the difference is this: their ultimate hope and my ultimate hope is not in something that is finite and changeable, like our own performance. It's a very shaky foundation. It is in something infinite, eternal, unchanging, and totally solid. And that makes all the difference. It brings peace into our lives. It brings joy. It brings meaning. It brings freedom. And it brings hope into our lives. So what about you? Where is your hope? Is it in God or is it in man? What would your life suggest is the answer to that question? Is your hope in God or is it man? All I can say to finish is that Jesus has completely changed my life. And it's the same for many people here today. Believe the gospel. Believe it. It's good news for you. Believe the gospel. Be born again. The invitation is there for you today. Let's baptize some people now.